Hello, this is Dr. Road. Recently, shorter crank arms have become the trend in the road bike market. Shimano crank arms are considered stiffer, but they are also heavier. And that's true. On top of that, complete bikes for beginners often come with slightly longer crank arms that make it easier to generate more power. This gives riders a good reason to upgrade their bikes. Since top-ranked pros competing for first and second place are using these setups, we inevitably end up following the trend. If you're interested in purchasing the Rockbros carbon crank arms, please check the video description or the pinned comment. That would greatly support me in producing more videos. After testing the Rockbros carbon crank arms, I found they had stiffness comparable to the Eli Lilly carbon crank arms I had been using. I think these are highly cost-effective carbon crank arms. Jonas Vingegaard is 175 centimeters tall and currently uses 160 millimeter crank arms. Tadej Pogačar, who is 176 centimeters tall, uses 165 millimeters crank arms. Previously, I installed Eli Lilly carbon crank arms with a Shimano 24 millimeter spindle diameter. This time, I'll be installing the Rockbros version with a SRAM standard 29 millimeter spindle diameter. For those who want to keep using a Shimano bottom bracket, there's also a titanium spindle version available. You can simply buy that one. First, I weighed the crank arms, and they came in at about 320 grams, which is impressively light. If you already have a SRAM DUB bottom bracket, you can use these crank arms directly without replacing it. However, if you have a Shimano or other standard, you'll need to swap out your bottom bracket. Just check your frame's specifications to buy the correct one. Or you can measure the inner diameter of the bottom bracket shell to find the right match. There are two main bottom bracket types. The first is the threaded type, and the second is the press-fit type, which is pressed into the frame with tools. The main difference is that press-fit frames don't have threads in the bottom bracket shell. Press-fit bottom brackets can be easily removed using a headset bearing cup removal tool. My frame uses a 68 millimeter bottom bracket shell, so I'll be installing a BSA 68 millimeter SRAM DUB road bike bottom bracket. Because it's 68 millimeters, I don't need spacers and can mount it directly onto the frame. For other frames, please check the chart shown in this video. Bottom brackets have markings for left and right, so make sure to check carefully when installing. For carbon frames with split shell designs, it's best to use bottom brackets with aluminum cylinders to minimize flex and allow smoother crank rotation. I don't recommend plastic versions. This time, I used a ceramic bearing bottom bracket, which felt very smooth in rotation. Some say ceramic and steel bearings don't differ much in performance, but once installed, the ceramic bearings felt much smoother. Even if there isn't a huge performance gap, sometimes it's about the feel. That's why I personally prefer ceramic bearings. The price difference on AliExpress isn't that big either. Apply lithium grease to the threads of the bottom bracket shell before installation. When installing, make sure it threads in smoothly by hand. Be careful not to damage the threads of your frame. I used a TLFC 32 wrench to secure the bottom bracket. Alright, the bottom bracket installation is done. The Rockbros crank arms are compatible with EASTON standard power meters and chainring spiders. For budget and weight-saving reasons, I bought a Rero BCD 110 chainring spider. Looking closely, you'll notice it only works with Shimano chainrings. The mounting holes are asymmetrical at the top and bottom. If you plan to use a power meter, you'll need a spider and chainring specifically designed for it. So, I bought an EASTON EC90SL crank adapter spider for that purpose. For the chainrings, I went with a lightweight, strong, and high-performing product from Magine. As you can see, the machining is done to improve shifting performance. I secured the chainrings using Lite Pro aluminum bolts, They come in a variety of colors, and since I'm using a double chainring setup, I ordered the 8.5mm bolts. If you're using a single chainring, 6.5mm bolts are the right choice. I'd love to run a power meter, but since it's expensive, I'll save that for another time. For now, reducing bike weight is a big advantage in itself. Shimano big chainrings generally fall into 3 categories. First, the 54T, which performs well on flats at high speeds and downhill. That's called the standard chainring. Second, the 52T, which is an all-around mid-compact option. Third, the 50T compact chainring, which is better for climbs and endurance rides. Since I'll use it mainly for sprints and anaerobic training, I chose the 52T. It's also a good size for building leg strength and for comfortable touring. To tighten the chainring bolts, you can simply use a hex wrench, or, if needed, use a special tool to hold the nuts from the backside. To mount the chainring spider, first loosen the Rockbros crank spider bolts. Notice there's a small pin that prevents the chain from dropping inside. Align the spider using that pin. Next, install the lock ring that secures the spider. I used a 20T bottom bracket tool, the same type used for square taper BBs. Most multi-tool sets for bikes include this tool. Tighten the compression ring so it sits all the way in. Apply a thin layer of grease to the non-drive side spindle. Then insert the crank arm from the non-drive side. The spindle will pop out on the other side. Now, add spacers as needed so the crank spins smoothly. Proper spacing also ensures the front derailleur is aligned correctly. Next, install the crank arm and tighten the bolts. Then adjust the compression ring until the crank spins smoothly. It shouldn't be too tight or too loose. That's the key. Once you're happy with the adjustment, tighten the bolts to secure everything. Apply grease to the pedal threads, insert the washers, and mount the pedals. Remember, the drive side pedal tightens clockwise. The non-drive side pedal tightens counterclockwise. Since the chainring position might have shifted slightly, don't forget to retrim your front derailleur. If this video was helpful, please give it a like. And feel free to leave questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.